Your hiding season was never punishment. It was preparation for the moment God would push you into purpose unapologetically. You thought God forgot about you, didn't you? You thought the silence meant rejection, that the closed doors meant abandonment, that the lonely places meant He changed His mind about you. But that wilderness wasn't your grave. It was your classroom. That isolation wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your becoming. God was never punishing you by pulling you back. He was preserving you. He was keeping you from rooms that would have clapped for your performance but crushed your purpose. He was shielding you from the spotlight because the oil on your life wasn't ready to flow yet. He was keeping you hidden because visibility without preparation is a setup for destruction. You thought you were being overlooked, but heaven had its eye on you the whole time. You thought nothing was happening, but everything was happening in silence. The roots were growing. The foundation was forming. The real you was being shaped away from applause, away from opinions, away from pressure. Because what God is birthing in you can't be sustained by hype. It has to be built on healing. It has to be built on truth. It has to be built on an identity that doesn't shift with seasons or crumble under criticism. And so God hid you. He placed you in a space where the noise couldn't reach you. He removed the distractions so He could deliver the directions. He silenced the crowd so you could hear the Creator. And yes, it hurt. Yes, it was lonely. Yes, it made you question your worth. But that hiding place was holy. It was the place where God stripped away your need to be seen and replaced it with the hunger to be sent. It was the place where you learned that being chosen doesn't always feel good. It often feels like being set apart in ways that no one understands. You watched others rise. You watched others receive what looked like your promise. You watched doors open for people who didn't even pray the way you prayed. And still God whispered, not yet. Still God said, wait. Still God said, stay hidden a little longer. Not because you weren't ready to speak, but because you weren't ready to withstand what came after you spoke. Not because you weren't anointed, but because He needed your character to match your call. He needed your heart to be pure enough to carry the weight of your assignment. He needed your discernment to be sharp enough to navigate the warfare that would come with your influence. And that kind of preparation doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the secret place. So while you were crying out to be seen, God was crafting a version of you that would be unshakable when the lights came on. While you were asking for release, He was strengthening your resolve. While you were begging for breakthrough, He was building your backbone. Because purpose will not coddle you. It will challenge everything in you that's fragile, everything in you that's inconsistent, everything in you that's still people-pleasing, still insecure, still looking for validation. And the hiding season reveals what applause can't fix. The hiding season shows you who you are when nobody is watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, no retweets, just you and God and the questions that won't let you sleep. It's in that place that your motives get purified, your vision gets clarified, your faith gets fortified, because purpose isn't birth in popularity, it's birth in pressure. And God knew the pressure was coming. God knew the assignment on your life would require a level of maturity that can't be microwaved. So He slowed you down. He sat you still. He told you no, not to hurt you, but to help you hold what's coming. You see, when God hides you, He's not hiding you from your destiny. He's hiding you for it. He's not keeping you from purpose. He's carving you into the kind of person who can carry purpose without it crushing you. Because let's be honest, the version of you that entered the hiding season wasn't ready. She was still bound by comparison. She was still trying to earn what God gave freely. She was still afraid to stand alone, afraid to let go, afraid to trust her own voice. She still needed approval more than she needed alignment. But something happened in the hiding. God started stripping, God started severing, God started sanctifying. He started showing you that who you are with Him in private is more powerful than who you try to be in public. He started showing you that stillness is strategy, that obedience is the real influence, that healing is the real platform, that you don't need a title to be anointed, that you don't need followers to be effective, that you don't need a stage to walk in power, because what he put in you wasn't meant to fit the mold. It was meant to break it. That's why it had to hurt. That's why it had to stretch. That's why it had to feel like loss, because God was making space for the anointing, space for the upgrade, space for the version of you that isn't triggered by every storm, isn't shaken by every silence, isn't offended by every delay. Space for the woman who understands that just because they don't call your name doesn't mean heaven hasn't assigned you. Space for the woman who understands that her value isn't in her visibility, it's in her vessel.
Yeah.
Because you are a carrier of something sacred. You are pregnant with something holy. And when you are carrying something that precious, you don't need to be in every room. You don't need to be in every conversation. You don't need to chase what God is preparing you to attract. All you need to do is stay hidden until heaven says it's time. All you need to do is stay planted when your flesh wants to be promoted. All you need to do is trust that the same God who called you is the same God who will reveal you when the soil is ready. And when he reveals you, it will not be based on your performance. It will be based on your process, because God doesn't promote perfection. He promotes surrender. He elevates the ones who let him break them, remake them, refine them. And you, beloved, have been refined in the fire. You have been molded in the crushing. You have been shaped by seasons that try to shatter you. But instead of breaking, you bent. Instead of quitting, you questioned and still stayed. Instead of running, you rooted yourself. And now God is saying the hiding was for this. The hiding was never to shrink you. It was to save you from releasing something before it was ripe, because fruit that's picked too soon never reaches its full sweetness. Oil that's pressed too fast doesn't carry the potency. And calling that's revealed too early won't last under the weight of warfare. So God let you simmer. He let you marinate in the secret place. He let you sit with the questions, the contradictions, the confusion, not to frustrate you, but to fortify you. Because the version of you that's coming out of hiding is not the same one who entered. She walks different, she talks different, she sees different, she no longer begs for rooms, she builds them. She no longer waits for validation, she walks in vision. And when God pushes her out, because he won't do it quietly. He's going to make a statement. He's going to reveal what's been hidden in such a way that even your enemies won't be able to deny it. He's going to open doors that don't make sense to people who don't know your wilderness. He's going to place you in positions that your resume can't explain, because the hiding season gave you what hustle never could: depth, intimacy, substance, authority. And when you carry authority, you don't have to announce yourself. The chains will break because you've been with God, because you've wept in his presence, because you've walked through fire and didn't come out smelling like smoke, because you stayed when it was easier to run, because you worshiped when it didn't make sense, because you said yes even when your voice was trembling, because you surrendered the version of you that was born for this. The version of you that survived wasn't the final version. God is peeling back the layers to reveal the healed, whole, and purpose-filled you. What survived was a reflection of what you had to be to make it through, not who you were always destined to become. The survivor version of you knew how to adapt. She knew how to smile through pain, how to keep showing up when her heart was breaking, how to suppress the scream building in her soul so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. She was the version of you that picked up the broken pieces and carried them like trophies, proving that broken things can still move forward. But just because you move forward with pieces missing doesn't mean God intended for you to stay broken. Just because you functioned in pain doesn't mean pain is your permanent address. God was never going to leave you there. He allowed that version of you to survive, not because it was the final product, but because survival was a necessary detour on the way to wholeness. There's a you God is calling forth that doesn't just survive, she thrives. She doesn't just mask the wounds, she lives with scars that testify, and a heart that has learned how to beat again without fear. She doesn't just show up to the room, she commands it with quiet authority, because she knows what it cost her to walk in healing. God has been peeling back the layers, not because he wants to expose you, but because he wants to introduce you. The youth has been buried under expectations, under generational trauma, under religious performance, under shame, under fear, under survival mode. That version of you, the one who was shaped by necessity rather than authenticity, was only ever meant to get you through the wilderness, not to live in the promise. That version was strong, yes. She was resilient, yes. But she was tired. She was guarded. She didn't even know what it meant to be seen without trying to be perfect. She thought vulnerability was weakness because too many times vulnerability got violated. She thought rest was laziness because she was trained to equate busyness with value. She thought silence meant irrelevance because she had to scream just to be heard. But God, in his gentle, powerful, intentional way, started to peel. He started to unravel. He started to reach beneath the armor, beneath the mask, beneath the script you had been reading from just to survive another day. He didn't do it all at once because grace doesn't reveals. Grace doesn't tear away. It tenderly removes what no longer serves you so that what God placed within you can finally breathe. And so the healing didn't look like a miracle. It looked like a process. It looked like breaking down in your car and not hiding the tears. It looked like setting boundaries that made people uncomfortable but saved your peace. It looked like walking away from things that looked good but weren't God. It looked like being okay with being misunderstood because pleasing people was slowly killing you. It looked like learning to pray not for platforms but for peace. It looked like showing up for yourself in a world that taught you self-neglect was holiness. It looked like God giving you moments where the silence was louder than the noise, where he isolated you not to punish you, but to position you. Because in isolation, there's no one left to impress. In isolation, it's just you and God, and he starts talking to the version of you that was buried, the version of you that remembers the dreams before disappointment distorted them, the version of you that still believes despite the betrayal, the version of you that wants to feel again, trust again, hope again. And that version, oh, she's not weak, she's not naive, she's just tired of wearing a mask, she's just ready to become, she's just waiting for permission to rise. And God is saying, now is the time. The survival version of you made sense in the wilderness. She was necessary when every day felt like a battle. She knew how to fight, how to hustle, how to grind. She learned how to clap for others even when she was crying in private. She learned how to be everyone's strength while feeling empty. But that strength, while admirable, wasn't always sustainable because strength that comes from striving will always run out. Strength that comes from pretending will always leave you exhausted. God never called you to live in survival mode forever. That season was about keeping your head above water, but now he's calling you to walk on it. That season was about not drowning in sorrow, but now he's calling you to dance in joy. But in order to do that, he has to peel back the identity you created to protect yourself. He has to remove the layers that helped you cope but can't help you rise. He has to challenge the narratives you adopted just to stay safe. You see, healing isn't just about letting go of the pain. It's about letting go of the person you became because of it. And that's the hard part, because that version of you may have been hurt, but she was also familiar. She was predictable. She was accepted. She had mastered how to fit in even when she was suffocating. But God isn't calling you to fit in. He's calling you to be free. And freedom doesn't always feel good at first. It feels like exposure. It feels like walking into a room without armor, without applause, without a plan B. It feels like standing in front of the mirror and realizing you don't recognize the real you because she's been hidden for so long. It feels like questioning everything you built your identity on and asking God to rebuild from the rubble. It feels like trusting that God didn't just save your soul. He wants to rescue your identity. He wants to reintroduce you to joy without guilt. He wants to reawaken dreams that were buried beneath disappointment. He wants to restore the you that you were before people told you who you had to be. That's what this season is about. It's not about success. It's about shedding. It's not about proving. It's about peeling. It's not about performance. It's about presence, because God knows that the world doesn't need a polished version of you. It needs a present one. It needs a version of you who has encountered grace so deeply that she no longer needs to hide her flaws to feel worthy. It needs a version of you who walks in purpose, not pressure. A version of you who understands that what survived wasn't wrong, but it was incomplete. And so God is dealing with the incomplete. He's going back to the places you avoided. He's touching the wounds you thought were healed just because you stopped talking about them. He's interrupting the patterns you called personality, but were really just protection. He's giving you language for what you went through so that you don't have to keep rehearsing pain. You can release it. He's teaching you how to walk without limping, how to love without losing yourself, how to be seen without shrinking, because this next version of you, the healed version, the whole version, the purpose-filled version, she's going to need all of you, not just the survivor, not just the strong one, but the soft one, the scared one, the sacred one. She's going to need the you who still believes in miracles, still believes in redemption, still believes that beauty can come from ash. And God isn't intimidated by the layers. He's the one who saw the real you before the layers ever formed. He's the one who loved the little girl inside you that the world tried to silence. He's the one who sat with you in the dark and whispered, there's more. And now that more is rising. It's rising from the ashes of what you lost. It's rising from the rubble of what didn't work out. It's rising from the prayers you thought were unanswered, but were really being stored for such a time as this. You are not late. You are not behind. You are right on time for the unveiling. You are right on time for the breakthrough. You are right on time for the becoming. God is not in a rush with you. He's intentional. He's been weaving together every moment, every memory, every mistake to bring you to this revelation that what survived was a grace, but what's about to rise is glory. And you're not rising in spite of the pain. You're rising because of it. The real you is not the version that people clapped for when you performed out of fear or insecurity. The real you is not the version that played small to make others comfortable, that dimmed her light to fit into places she had already outgrown, that silenced her truth to keep the peace in rooms that were never designed for her expansion. The real you is the one God saw before anyone else had an opinion. The one he knit together with divine intention. The one he whispered to in the dark and covered when no one else could see the battle behind your smile. The real you is not a performance. It is not a costume. It is not the curated version that you post for approval. The real you is raw, unfiltered, powerful, and holy. She is who God always intended to rise, not the polished image, not the people pleaser, not the perfectionist exhausted from trying to be enough in spaces that were too small for her purpose. And the reason the last season broke you wasn't because you were weak. It was because the false self you were clinging to couldn't carry the weight of your assignment. God wasn't letting you fall apart. He was letting the mask slip. He was letting the costume tear. He was letting the illusion unravel so that the original you, the called you, the anointed you, the healed you could come forth. You see, purpose doesn't partner with pretense, and calling doesn't coexist with compromise. You can't fully step into destiny while dragging dead identities behind you. So God started revealing what had to die. He started showing you where you were still wearing roles that were rooted in rejection, where you were still showing up as the strong one, the fixed one, the one who never needed help because being needed felt safer than being known. But God wasn't interested in blessing who you pretended to be. He was committed to blessing the you he created, and that version of you needed to be excavated from the debris of trauma, shame, survival, and expectations. He had to dismantle the lie that said you had to earn love, that you had to prove your worth, that you had to hide your wounds to be used, because the real you is not the version that performs healing while still bleeding. The real you is the one who let God touch the places no one else could, who let him speak into the silence of your suffering, who let him pull purpose out of the pain you try to bury. And that version of you doesn't need to be molded. She needs to be revealed. But revelation comes with resistance, because the moment you stop performing, people get uncomfortable. The moment you start speaking truth, the crowd gets quiet. The moment you decide to stop shrinking, those who benefited from your silence start calling you difficult, too much, too different. But let them talk, let them label, let them walk away. Because your deliverance is not dependent on their comfort. Your healing doesn't have to fit into their understanding. And the version of you that God is raising up doesn't answer to their expectations. She answers to heaven's assignment. She is no longer afraid to take up space, no longer apologizing for her growth, no longer negotiating her worth at tables that require her to betray her becoming. Because she's been through too much to go back. She's cried too many tears to play small now. She's seen too much of God to pretend she doesn't carry glory. And this time she's not showing up to impress. She's showing up to impact. She's not walking in to be light. She's walking in to be light. She's not here to compete. She's here to complete what God started in her before the foundations of the world. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's unfamiliar. Yes, it feels like standing on shaky legs after years of crawling in compromise. But that's what it feels like when you're standing in truth for the first time. That's what it feels like when you're no longer hiding behind roles that were killing your spirit. That's what it feels like when you're no longer addicted to applause. You begin to realize that freedom doesn't feel like euphoria. It feels like shedding everything that was attached to survival. And when you start shedding, you start seeing how much of your life was shaped by wounds you never acknowledged. How many of your decisions were driven by fear of abandonment. How often you said yes out of guilt and no out of fear. And in that seeing, God begins to reveal not just what you need to release, but what you need to reclaim: your voice, your power, your discernment, your peace. The real you that's been buried under years of expectation and performance starts to rise. And when she rises, she doesn't need permission. She doesn't ask if she's too loud, too bold, too honest, too emotional, because she knows that her sensitivity is sacred. Her boldness is biblical. Her honesty is healing. And her emotions are not a liability. They are a signal of divine movement. She stops apologizing for what makes her different. She stops minimizing what makes her whole, because she realizes that her authenticity is her anointing. That her vulnerability is her vehicle for breakthrough. That her story, even the part she tried to forget, is the soil where someone else's freedom will be planted. And when she steps into that, she no longer needs to prove anything, because she understands that she's not performing for approval. She's partnering with heaven. She's not striving for validation. She's walking in revelation. You bless the places you show up in. You shift the atmosphere with your presence. You carry oil that can't be copied. You carry grace that can't be faked, because you've been processed, you've been pruned, you've been prepared in private. And now God is revealing the version of you that's been marinating in his presence. That's why you don't feel the same anymore. That's why the places that once felt safe now feel suffocating. That's why the people who used to affirm you now seem confused by you. It's not that you're arrogant. It's not that you've changed for the worse. It's that you're evolving into alignment. You're finally becoming the version of you that doesn't contort herself to stay connected. You're finally stepping into identity without apology. And not everyone can go with you. Not every relationship can survive revelation. Not every environment can hold the weight of who you're becoming. And that's okay, because growth is not betrayal. Elevation is not ego. Healing is not rejection. It's necessary. It's holy. It's ordained. And the real you is worth the shedding. She's worth the grief of leaving behind what no longer fits. She's worth the silence of losing people who only love the broken version. She's worth the awkwardness of not knowing where you belong anymore, because you are not meant to blend in. You are meant to blaze trails. You are not here to maintain status quo. You are here to usher in revival. You are not here to be tolerated. You are here to be transformed. And as the real you rises, don't be surprised if everything around you starts shifting. Don't be alarmed when your appetite changes, when your tolerance for foolishness decreases, when your spirit starts craving stillness over noise, purpose over popularity, presence over performance, because the real you can't thrive in pretense. She needs depth. She needs truth. She needs connection that doesn't require you to shrink. She needs spaces that can handle your calling, not just your compliance. And when you give her room to rise, she will start making decisions that don't make sense to your old self. She'll start setting boundaries where there used to be burnout. She'll start speaking up where there used to be silence. She'll start choosing peace over being liked. She'll start walking away from what she used to chase, because she's no longer operating from fear. She's functioning from fullness, and fullness doesn't settle. So if you feel like you're in a season where everything familiar is fading, everything comfortable is shaken, everything you once depended on is no longer working, don't panic. That's the sound of the false you falling away. That's the sound of old patterns breaking. That's the sound of heaven making room for the real you to rise. The one who's no longer hiding behind hustle. The one who no longer needs a title to know she's chosen. The one who doesn't confuse being busy with being impactful. The one who understands that rest is not laziness, it's warfare.